Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Jerry Brownlee.
Mr Speaker, I move that the Customs and Excise Budget Measures Motor Spirits Amendment Bill be now read a third time. Mr Speaker, increases in petrol excise combined with the increases in road user charges will provide the revenue this country needs to deliver long overdue improvements to the land transport network. The increases will lift the rate of excise duty on petrol to about 59.5 cents per litre in 2015. Compared to other developed countries, this rate is low. In fact, even following these increases, New Zealand will have the 5th lowest rate of petrol tax in the OECD. New Zealand also has one of the only hypothecated schemes in the OECD. In other words, all the money that is taken off the roads is spent on the roads. Maintaining this system ensures that road users throughout the country continue to be the ones who are funding investment and maintenance in the roading network. Mr Speaker, these increases will allow significant investment in the country's many important transport projects, and I commend this bill to the House.
Point of order.
Point of order, Louise Upston.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I seek leave of the House to adjourn at the conclusion of this third reading and forego the dinner break.
Leave is sought for that. Is there any objection? There is objection. The question is the motion be agreed to.
Mr Speaker.
Ian Lees-Galloway.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Well, it's been a long day of debate, but here we are in the third reading, and we're very close to the point at which the National Party, supported by the Greens and the Mana Party, will be increasing taxes on hard-working, middle and low-income New Zealanders, sir. And that is an outrage, because it is an absolute contradiction to what the National Party said they were going to do before they came into government. John Key went up and down New Zealand. He went to every single region, he went to every single city, he stared down the barrel of every single camera he could get in front of, and he told New Zealanders that he was going to bring down taxes. He was going to bring down costs on everyday hard-working New Zealanders, and that's not what happened at all. What has happened is the National Party came to government, they immediately cut taxes for their mates. They immediately cut taxes for the mates. Then they realised, oh, no, they probably couldn't do that. So then they immediately reversed the tax cuts for their mates. But then the next year they had another go at it, and they cut taxes. They cut the top tax rate, the tax rate that their mates pay, that the wealthy pay. And what they've done subsequent to that is they have found every single possible way of putting up taxes on middle and low-income New Zealanders. It started, sir, with the GST. Now, remember before the election, again, does everybody remember before the election? No ifs, no buts, no maybes. John Key's absolute cast iron guarantee promised to New Zealand that National would not be raising GST. He said National is not going to be raising GST. National wants to cut taxes, not raise taxes. And he said that the fastest way to eliminate deficits was to get New Zealand back into surplus and get New Zealand growing again. And that surplus, Mr Speaker, that surplus is, of course, what this is all about. So what has John Key had to do to get the government's books back into surplus? Well, it certainly hasn't been anything to do with growing the economy. If the economy was growing, if this government was doing its job, if it was actually working for New Zealanders, if it wasn't too busy working for Sky City, if it wasn't too busy working for the Warner Brothers, if it wasn't too busy working for anybody else except for the New Zealand taxpayer, then this country would be growing again, and the government would not have to resort to putting up GST, increasing the cost of early childhood education, increasing ACC, and increasing fuel excise taxes, just so that they can squeak in that $75 million budget surplus that they are predicting. That's what this is about, sir. 75 million. 75 million. 75 million. 75 million. That is it 0.1%? No, it's less than that. It is such a tiny, insignificant proportion of the government's total revenue that if the government sneezes out of turn, it could lose that surplus in a moment. It just takes one cock-up from Simon Bridges and it's all over, sir. That's all it would take. And so, Mr Speaker, that's the real reason why this National Party has put up taxes again for hard-working New Zealanders, sir. And of course, we know it's all about the surplus because they've been overcharging Kiwis on ACC for so long. They've actually finally accepted that it's time to reduce the ACC charges. But did they do it a year ago when their officials told them it was time to do it? No. Will they do it this year? No. When will they do it? They'll do it after they get to that surplus. They haven't even factored it in. They've sort of promised it, hinted at it. Well, maybe that'll be another broken promise if the government can't get its books back into shape. If we're not quite at the surplus, maybe those ACC cuts just won't happen, even though New Zealanders are being overcharged for ACC, just like they are now being overcharged for their fuel excise taxes, sir. Now, if for a moment we actually believe the Minister and say that this is about building transport infrastructure, we know from his first reading speech and his second reading speech that this is all about the roads of political significance. He tried to U-turn a bit on that in the committee stage, sir. He tried to say it was about the whole transport network, but the Minister's own words in the first and second reading speeches were that this was all about funding the roading network. And that is, of course, what the hollow men want. They want all that money that's raised by fuel excise taxes to go into the roads of political significance. That's actually, if this has got anything to do with transport infrastructure, that's what it's about. Because the National Party doesn't believe in an integrated transport system. Or the provinces, as my colleague Annette King says. Because our national transport infrastructure involves local roads, it involves railway lines, like the railway line, the Napier to Gisborne railway line. It involves roads like State Highway 3 in Taranaki. It involves cycleways. It involves active transport like walking and cycling in urban areas. It involves public transport like urban rail and buses, and it involves motorways. Look, motorways are important. Coastal shipping, highly important. Coastal shipping will never get backed by the National Party because they can't stick it in front of the voters and say, look what we did. Most of the voters don't reside somewhere a couple of miles off the coast, so they can't see that. They can't see that. Well, the protesters can't go out there either, Mr Mallard, because they've got rid of the protesters too. So what the National Party has done is they've put all of it into the highways. Now look, sometimes highways are the answer. Sometimes you do the analysis of what the need is and what the solution is, and sometimes highways are the answer. And it is important to complete the roading networks in Auckland that both Labour and National parties have supported in the past. But it can't all be about highways. And it's absolutely disingenuous for the Minister to stand up and say that he supports a diverse transport network, a diverse range of infrastructure for the transport network, because he has said himself that this is all about the holiday highways. That is what the National Party's flagship transport infrastructure program is all about. That is all they ever want to talk about. They said no when Len Brown came to them with a package for Auckland that included the Central City Rail Link, and I wish National Party members would get it through their heads that it is not a loop, it is a link. It is about opening up the entire rail network in Auckland and making it more effective and more efficient. But the National Party says no, because they hate rail. They will never support rail, because rail might get in the way of the roads of political significance. That's what the National Party's MO is when it comes to transport infrastructure. Mr Speaker, voters can rely on the Labour Party to take a sensible, sustainable approach to building an integrated transport network, sir. The resources that we have in the transport budget are limited. We have to be wise about how we use them. And we cannot hurl everything at projects which are purely for political gain. We have to do what is right for growth. We have to do what is right to ensure that our communities are connected. We have to do what is right to make sure that our transport infrastructure is environmentally sustainable, that we work towards reducing emissions, not only to ensure that we have less of an impact on our environment, but also to improve public health, sir. Because it is important. It is a very important component of making sure that New Zealanders are healthy and have a good standard of life, that public health considerations are taken into account when building transport infrastructure. But the government's got rid of all of those things. We used to have legislation that said that transport infrastructure had to be affordable, that it had to be effective, that it had to be efficient, that it had to take into account public health, that it had to take into account the environment. But the government got rid of all of that. It got rid of the legislation that gets in the way of its roads of political significance. That's what the government has done. So that was the first aspect, and this just backs that up. It got rid of the roadblocks that might somehow get in the way of its road building program, and now it's raising taxes on middle and low income New Zealanders to pay for a funding gap that was created by Stephen Joyce. He deliberately told the NZTA to overspend on roads. That is where the funding gap came from, Mr. Speaker. And I find it outrageous that this National Party that tells New Zealand that it is all about lowering taxes takes a tax and spend approach and a profligate approach to roading, and that it is doing that off the backs of hard-working New Zealanders, sir.
Excellent speech.
David Bennett.
I move that the bill progress, and it's good for Waikato and especially the Waikato Expressway. Thank you, Mr.
Grant Robertson.
Well,
You're
Mr. Speaker,
seeking a
I
call,
presume
aren't you?
I'm now speaking to the amended motion that Mr. Bennett has
member,
put up.
Order, it's the member want the call or not?
Yeah, Mr. Speaker.
The member has the call.
Well, Mr. Speaker, very confusing.